Welcome to another episode of the Budding Watch Enthusiast. So this week, this is a topic that was something I was planning on doing. I wanted to do an episode as like an introduction to complications. And I thought about it and there wasn't really enough teeth in it to do like a full episode about intro to complications. But then a viewer, and shout out to Will, who made a comment on a YouTube video, actually on the review for the Dan Henry watch, I do believe, if I recall correctly, basically said it's interesting that people, that watch enthusiasts still strive for watches with complications on them. And he was talking about chronographs in particular, in that if you're really trying to time something accurately in this day and age, digital watches are a much more accurate way to time stuff if you're actually doing stuff for timing. And also, I mean, do you even need a watch to do something like that anymore? Because we all carry smartphones now in our pockets, and all of our smartphones have stopwatches on them, and we have devices that are with us every day. And so why is it that, and he was talking about chronographs in particular, but I think that this conversation can be expanded to complications as a whole. Why do we love complications so much as watch enthusiasts? So I thought that would be an interesting topic to kind of sit here and discuss today. Before we get into it, I'm wearing, like I mentioned, the Dan Henry 1939 military chronograph, a very appropriate watch to be wearing during this discussion because it does have a chronograph complication, and it also has a ton of different, dials and meters all over the watch that by today's modern standards are very outdated. But are still very cool to have. And I just did a review on this watch, which you can check out as well. I'll have a link in the descriptions below. But let's talk about complications. And to talk about them, just in case you're newer to watches, you're a newer enthusiast, let's do a brief overview of exactly what is a complication when we're talking about wristwatches. And simply put, a complication is basically anything that's added to the watch's movement that does any function besides telling time. So like I said, the basic function of a watch, it's to tell time, minutes, hours, and seconds is normal. Anything else you add on top of that makes it do other stuff with the movement is considered to be a complication. That can be simple stuff like a date window or a day window, a dial that rotates around to indicate the date change. That could be more complicated things like a chronograph, or things that even go even wilder beyond that. But that's what a complication is, simply put. And there's tons of different ones out there. I'm not going to do a thorough rundown of all of them. We will circle back around at the end of the video, and I'll talk about some of my favorite complications that you see on watches today. But the point does remain, why do we need them? I mean, and again, stuff like a date window is more of a convenience thing. It's an easier complication. Of course, that way you can just glance at your wrist, tell what the date is in case you forgot, or what day it is in case you forgot. But stuff like chronographs and perpetual calendars, what else do I have? GMT hands, moon phases. Like, these are all complications that are on watches. And are they really that necessary anymore in this day and age in which we live, where technology is something that is a part of us at pretty much every waking hour of the day? I would imagine that pretty much everyone watching this video carries a smartphone in their pocket with them. You might even be watching this video on a smartphone, and a smartphone does all of these functions. It's got a stopwatch. It tells me the day of the week. It tells me the date. If I wanted to know what phase of the moon was currently happening, I'm sure that I could just ask Google which phase of the moon it was today, and it could tell me what's going on. So we don't need all that stuff on wristwatches. But watch enthusiasts still love complications. Why is that? There's a couple reasons that I love them, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. The first one is that they're just really fun. It's fun to have something on your wrist that is a mechanical device that can still do all this stuff. Any digital watch or smartphone can have a stopwatch on it, but the fact that this mechanical piece of equipment can do that, to me, is really neat. The engineering that goes behind it, and I think that kind of bleeds in also to the second reason that I love complications, is that I really appreciate the design and engineering that goes into making them. So, again, a three-hand watch movement is tricky enough, and we're talking mechanical watches. Quartz we can kind of separate to the side of this equation probably. But a three-hand watch movement is complicated enough with as many small pieces and as many, elaborate things go into making that watch movement. But now add, another dial that has a date on it that has to change at a very specific time of the day. It has to flip over to the next day, that you also have to, in modern times, be able to set quickly and separately from the three-hand watch movement as well. Then go a step further and talk about a chronograph. This thing that has these mechanisms, these specific mechanisms that have to be built into the movement of the watch that make the chronograph function, but still have to make sure that the watch fits inside of this very small and very specifically sized case. That takes a lot of engineering. That takes a lot of know-how. I'm sure that there was a ton of trial and failure when these movements were first developed, and that's also gone into refining them over the years. And as someone, I just really appreciate all the hard work and all of the intelligence and everything that went into designing that stuff. And then you talk about stuff like perpetual calendars. I mean, here's a watch function that when you set the day, the date, and where you are in relation to a leap year with your watch, as long as you keep the watch wound, you never have to touch it again. It does, the different length months automatically. When it's time for a leap year, it knows to add an extra day into February automatically. That's amazing. Like, I can't even put together how that can be done in such a way. And again, completely mechanical. There's not an electronic part in any of it. And you do pay usually way more money to get these complications, but that's part of the charm, I think, with watches, and one of the reasons why it's awesome. If every watch that existed was just a typical, three-hander, just told the time, no more, no less, watches would kind of be boring. Like, it's nice to have the variety of having these different watches that have these different functions, and they're just cool. Like, I don't know how else to explain it other than they're really fun, and they're just, I don't even want to say it's of a bygone era, because complications can still be useful today. Like I said, being able to glance at, not having to pull your phone out of the pocket to tell the time and tell what date it is great. Not having to pull your phone out to time something if it's something trivial. Like, I'm not talking about timing, something important here. Just timing my coffee in the morning. I don't want to have to pull my phone out and find my clock app and pull that up and pull up a stopwatch to do that. It's cool just to be able to take my watch and just go click and let that go. And then when I'm done, you press another button, you look at the time, or you just keep track of it. It's very cool, very simple, elegant way to do it. Just complications are fun. I don't know what else to say other than complications are so fun. So I want to wrap this up by talking about the three really coolest complications to me. And the first one is, I talked about earlier, perpetual calendar. I'm just fascinated by the fact that you can somehow design a watch to be, intelligent enough to know all this information. And it blows my mind, frankly, that a perpetual calendar is a thing that exists. And I'm pretty sure you can boil it down and show me, the engineering on how that works. I still find it incredibly interesting, and it's a very, very cool complication. So the second one, moon phases. A very specific niche of complication, but I guess one that's pretty cool, so that you can look at your watch and see if it's a full moon or see if the full moon's coming, that sort of thing. Who would even think to put a moon phase on a wristwatch? I don't know, but it's cool that they did, and it's cool that watches still continue to put out those. My wife actually loves that complication. She just is enamored with a moon phase, so I guess I have to buy her a watch at some point that has a moon phase complication. The last one, arguably besides a date window, the last one that I'm going to mention is probably the most practical modern day complication, and that is the GMT hand. GMT hand is very simple. It's just an additional either an extra hour hand that's independent of the regular hour hand that you can set to separate time zones, so you can keep track of a different time. I think some GMT watches, like the better GMT watches, and I've never had one, so you can correct me if I'm wrong here, have it where they have a bezel around the outside that has a 24-hour time zone, and then the GMT hand actually moves along the bezel and not necessarily the 12 hours that's on the watch dial. Again, please correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'm pretty sure that's how most higher end GMTs work. But yeah, GMT hand, very cool, very practical. Obviously, if you're a pilot, they're really useful. But even if you're not a pilot, like if you have family that lives in other parts of the country or in other parts of the world, or if you're a nerd like me and if you had a GMT watch, you'd probably set it to London times, that when Tottenham Hotspur is supposed to be playing, because a lot of times when you see the times posted, it's in local time to them, and you have to do the calculations. But yeah, GMT, it's a very simple complication, but arguably the one that's the most practical in today's use. So that is it. That is it. Brief video on watch complications. Let me know in the comments below, what is your favorite watch complication, and why do you love complications as well? Tell me the reasons why you guys think they're awesome too. So that is it. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you could do me a huge favor, hit that like button down there. Also, if you've not subscribed to the channel, click the red subscribe button, click the bell icon. That way you'll be notified whenever I post a new video. And also too, if you use Instagram, if you have not followed me, that'd be great if you did that as well. You can find me there at Budding Watch Enthusiast. So that is it for this week. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you the next time.